Hi, welcome to Hikate's Crossing as we continue with the journey of The Secret of Shambhala. Now, this is the third book in the series, In Search of the 11th Insight. Okay, we are up to chapter 9. Now, chapter 9 is, let's have a look here. Just grab it. Chapter 9. Oops. The energy of evil. Okay, we are up to part 3. But before we begin this chapter, the energy of evil, we're going to use the Siddhartha Tarot with the Shadows of Light Oracle. Okay, by Haley Clear. Okay, so let's begin. Let's just take a moment, and we're looking at the energies of evil. A nice deep breath, and let's have a look and see what the cards have to say about the energies of evil. Oh, okay. The first card that flipped over with that was the Three of Pentacles. And so to me, it tells me it takes work. It takes a sense of creating something new within ourselves in regards to our well-being. Okay, it's about expanding our well-being. As threes for me is definitely about expansion and growth, dealing with any trials and tribulations and things like that, enabling us to sort of expand our sense of who we are physically, to allow ourselves that sense of creating something new in our journey, being able to create something that's going to assist us. Now, another card actually flipped out, so let's just dive to the ground. Let's just pick it up. Dive to the ground, pick it up. Okay, it's going to take some strength. Okay, and I think it also takes a lot of inner courage, to our inner power to grow and expand our own horizons and our own well-being. I think that takes a lot of courage sometimes. It can be quite scary to be able to surrender and let go to create that new energy within ourselves. It also enables us to look at the choices that we have available to us, the options that we have available, and being able to choose wisely and within ourselves the path that we want to go, allowing us to sort of, I get that sense of making wise choices is kind of really important. Oh, that sort of flew out there. And so we've got Five of Swords. Okay, to me, this can be, I get the sense about walking away from any conflicts or challenges, or any fights or anything like that. Being able to sort of know that there's no winners when there's quarrels and disagreements. Sometimes there's really no winners in it. It can be a lose for all, a lost for all in regards to the fights and the quarrels. Now, there can be some challenges, but how we choose to react is going to make a big, big difference mentally. And so we have the sense of gaining our wishes, being able to have that sense of a wish fulfilled, enabling us to know that there's still more ahead of us emotionally. It takes a lot of transformation and a lot of changes in our life. Let's sort of move those cards down a little bit so that you can see. It's going to take a lot of changes and transformations in our journey as well, which is kind of really important here. Okay, I've got one more card that's sort of peeping out here, and it's the King of Wands. And to me, I get the sense of thinking about our passions, our desires. What do we truly want in life? I think we're thinking about the new adventures, the new possibilities, about where we want to be, and being able to sort of take that action is kind of really important here. So there's a lot going on when we're talking about how we choose to sort of move forward, how we choose to react in the situation. So let's have a look at the Shadows of Light. Okay, this is sort of popped out. Okay, two cards came out together, and we've got trust and communication. So we've got that trusting when there's challenges ahead, I think there's got trust in the others around us as well. I think a part of that allows us to trust, reach out to others, and being able to communicate with. There is some complexity to the situation. Now, I do want to read what it says. So, trust was first, card number 19. So, let's have a look at trust and listen to this. In the free fall, the earth slips away. I know not what is to come. Grounded in faith, I hold the invisible hand. Kind of interesting. Now let's just have a look and see what 26. Now there's, of course, there's a whole lot more in the guidebook, but I just want to sort of read those little bits there. Okay, communication with complexity. How can I possibly understand the intricacy of you? Seeing beyond the eyes, feeling beyond the hands, hearing with the heart. So that's kind of really important here. So I'm just going to read a little bit here. It just says, trust the process. There is no certainty in this life. When you feel the mystery looming beneath, you have the choice to persevere and hold tight to that which you feel is steadfast, or to surrender your grip and allow yourself to fall into a new reality in faith that life will catch you. Confusion can be an invitation to find a different way to communicate. How can we release our assumptions and ask better questions that seek to find a deeper understanding of one another, knowing that words are can never be enough to explain such a beautifully complex experience as this. So, yeah, there's a whole lot more in the guidebook, but I just wanted to read that little bit there. So let's continue. So you can sort of meditate or reflect on these cards as you listen to the third part of this chapter. Okay, you ready? Take a nice deep breath. I stood looking out a porthole-sized window of a 30 by 30 foot insulated tent. Altogether, I could count at least 7 large tents and 3 small portable trailers of a size that could be airlifted easily. A gasoline generator hummed at the corner of the compound, and I could see several helicopters sitting in an area to the left. The snow had stopped falling, but had accumulated 12 or 14 inches on the ground. I strained to see to the right. From the lay of the mountain range in the background, I concluded that I had been flown only as far back as the centre of the valley. A night-time wind held, flapping the outside seams of the tent. When I had arrived, I had been forced to take a lukewarm shower and given warm Chinese fatigues and insulated underwear to put on. At least I was finally warm. I turned around and looked over at the armed Chinese guard sitting at the entrance. His eyes had been following my every move with a cold, icy stare that chilled my soul. Fatigue, I walked over and sat down on one of the 2 army cots in the corner. I tried to assess my situation, but I couldn't think. I was numb, petrified, so fearful, in fact, that I knew I wasn't very alert. I couldn't understand why I felt so incapacitated. It was a panic as intense as any I had ever experienced. I tried to take a deep breath and build energy, but I couldn't even get started. The bare light bulbs hanging from the tent ceiling filled the room with a dull, flickering light and ominous shadows. I could find no beauty anywhere around me. The flap of the tent opened up, and the soldier stood up at attention. Colonel Chang walked in and took off his thick parka, nodding to the guard. He then focused on me. I looked away. "We must talk," he said, pulling a folding chair over it and sitting 4 feet away. "I must have the answers to my questions now." He stared at me coldly for a moment. "Why are you here?" I decided to answer as truthfully as I could. "I'm here studying Tibetan legend. I told you that. You're here looking for Shambhala." I was silent. "Is that it?" he asked. "Is it in this valley?" The fear churned in my stomach. What would he do if I refused to answer? "Don't you know?" I asked. He smiled slightly. I would guess that you and the rest of your illegal sect think this is Shambhala. He looked puzzled as though remembering something else. We've glimpsed other people here, but they managed to elude us in the snow. Where are they? Where did they go? I don't know, I said. I don't even know where we are. He shifted towards me. We have also found the remains of plants recently alive. How is that possible? How could they have grown here? I just stared. He grinned coldly. How much do you really know about the legends of Shambhala? A little, I stammered. I know a lot. Do you believe that? By now I've had access to all the ancient writings, and I must say they are delightfully interesting as mythology. Think about it. An ideal community made up of enlightened human beings that are far more advanced mentally than any other culture on this planet. And I know the rest too. This idea that these individuals of Shambhala somehow have a secret power for good that permeates all the rest of humanity and pushes them in that direction. Fascinating stuff, don't you think? Ancient lore that could even be appreciated for that matter, if it weren't so misleading and dangerous for the people of Tibet. Don't you think if anything like that were real, we would have discovered it by now? God, spirit, it's all a childish dream. Take the Tibetan mythology about the Dakini, the idea that there are angel beings who can interact with us, help us. What do you believe in? I asked, trying to defuse the situation. He pointed to his head. I believe in the powers of the mind. This is why you should talk to me. Help us. We are most interested in the idea of psychic power, the greater range of brainwaves and their effect of electronics and people at a distance. But don't confuse this with spiritualism. The powers of mind are a natural phenomenon that can be researched and discovered scientifically. He ended his statement with an angry gesture with his hand, sending a deepening pang of fear through my stomach. I knew this man was extremely dangerous and absolutely remorseless. He was looking at me, but something attracted my attention. Along the wall of the tent behind him, directly across from the door where the guard was standing, the area had suddenly gotten brighter. The light bulb overhead flickered slightly, and I dismissed my perception as a surge from the generator. The colonel got up and walked a few steps towards me, looking more angry. Do you think I like journeying out here into this wasteland? How anyone survives out here is beyond me, but we are not leaving. We're going to enlarge this camp until we have enough troops to cover this whole area on foot. Whoever is here will be found and dealt with very harshly. He forced a half smile. But our friends will be equally rewarded. Do you understand? At this moment, another wave of fear rushed through me, but it was different. It was a fear mixed with great disdain. I was beginning to loathe the extent of this man's evil. I glanced behind him to the area that seemed lighter, but it was now flat and filled with shadows. The lightness had disappeared, and I felt totally alone. Why are you doing this? I asked. The Tibetan people have a right to their own religious beliefs. You're trying to destroy their culture. How can you do this? I could feel my anger making me stronger. My confrontation seemed only to energize him. Oh, you do have opinions, he smirked. Too bad they're so naive. You think what we are doing is unusual? Your own government is developing ways to control you too. Chips that can be inserted into the body of troops and unsuspecting troublemakers. And that's not all, he was almost shouting now. We know now that when people think a specific pattern of brainwaves radiates outwards, every government is working on machines that can identify these brainwaves, especially angry or anti-government sentiment. His statement chilled me. He was talking about the same misuse of brainwave amplification that Arnie had warned me about, the one that had doomed some early civilizations to ruin. Do you know why your so-called democratic governments are doing this? He went on. Because they are far more afraid of the people than we are. Our citizens know the role of government is to govern. They know that certain liberties have to be limited. Your people think there can be an individual self-direction. Well, if that was true in the past, it is a highly technical world where a suitcase weapon can destroy a city. It cannot work any longer. With that kind of freedom, humans will not survive. The direction, the values of society must be controlled and directed for the greater good. That's why this Shambhala legend is so dangerous. It is based on absolute self-direction. As he talked, I thought I heard the door open behind me, but I didn't turn around. I was focused totally on this man's attitude. Here was the worst of modern tyranny being voiced, and the more he talked, the more my loathing increased. What you don't see, I said, is that humans can find an inner motivation to create good in the world. He laughed cynically. Surely you don't believe that. Nothing in history would suggest that people are anything other than selfish and greedy. If you had your own spirituality, you would see the good. My voice was rising in anger too. No, he snapped, almost screaming. Spirituality is the problem. As long as there is a religion, there cannot be unity among people. Don't you understand? Each religious institution is like an inflexible roadblock on the path of progress. Each wars with the other. The Christians spend all their time and money wanting to convert everyone into their doctrine of judgmentalness. The Jews want to remain isolated in a dream of closeness. The Muslims think it's about camaraderie and collective power and holy hatred. And we in the East are the worst. We disregard the real world for a fanciful inner life no one can understand. With all this chaos of metaphysics, no one can focus on progress, on easing the burden of the poor, on seeing that every Tibetan child is educated. But don't worry, he went on. We're going to see that the problem is resolved, and you have helped us. Ever since Wilson James visited you in America, we've monitored your movements and the movements of the Dutch group. I knew you would come and that you would be involved. I must have looked surprised. Oh, yes, we have known all about you. We operate more freely in America than you think. Your NSA can monitor the internet. Do you think we cannot? You and this sect will never elude me. How do you think we could follow you into this weather? It was by power of mind, my mind. It came to me where you would be, even after were lost in this wilderness. I knew I could feel your presence. At first it was your friend Yin whom I could follow. Now it's been you. And that's not all. I don't even need to use my instincts to locate you anymore. I have your brainwave scan. He nodded towards the door. In a matter of minutes, our technicians will have mounted our new surveillance equipment. Then we'll be able to locate anyone we have scanned. At first, I couldn't remember what he was referring to, but then I recalled my experience at the Chinese house in Ali after I was gassed. The soldiers had put me under a machine. A new wave of fear raged through me, but it turned immediately into a deeper mad anger. You're mad, I screamed. That's right, to you I'm crazy, but I'm the future. He was towering over me now with his face red, virtually exploding with anger. Such stupid innocence. You're going to tell me everything you understand. Everything. I knew that he would not have given me all of this information if he planned to ever release me. But at that moment I didn't care. I was talking to a monster, and an overwhelming rage was filling me. I was about to verbalize his damnation again when a voice from the other side of the room called out, Don't! It weakens you. The colonel turned and stared, and I followed his gaze. There by the door stood another guard, and beside him, slumping against a small table, was Yin. The guard pushed him to the floor. I jumped up and raced over to Yin as the colonel said something in Chinese to the guards, then stormed out. Yin had bruises and cuts on his face. Yin, are you all right? I asked, helping him over to the cot. I'm okay, he said, pulling me down to sit on the cot beside him. They came for us right after you left. His eyes were full of excitement, telling me what had happened. Tell me what happened. Did you reach Shambhala? I looked at him and held my fingers to my lips. They probably put us together to see what we would say, I whispered. You can bet they have this place bugged. We shouldn't talk. We'll have to risk it, Yin said. Come over by the heater. It's noisy. Tell me what happened. For the next half hour, I told him all about the world I had found in Shambhala. Then in the barest whispers, I mentioned the temples. His eyes grew wider. So you haven't found all of the fourth extension? I mouthed. It's at the temples. It's at the temples. I went on to tell him about Tashi and Will, and what Arnie had said about learning about those in the temples were doing. And what else did she say? Yin asked. She said we must have no enemies, I replied. Yin grimaced in pain for a moment, and he said, But you're doing exactly that with the colonel. You were using your anger and disdain to feel strong. Those are the mistakes I made. You're lucky he did not kill you immediately. I slumped back, knowing my emotions were out of control. Don't you remember when your negative expectation drove away the Dutch couple in the van and you missed an important synchronicity? In that case, you were having a fair expectation that they were perhaps going to do you harm. They felt that expectation on your part and probably began to feel that if they stopped, they would be doing something wrong, so they left. Yes, I remember. Every negative assumption or expectation, Yin continued, that we make about another human being is a prayer that goes out and acts to create the reality in that person. Remember, our minds connect. Our thoughts and expectations go out and influence others to think the same way we do. That's what you've been doing with the Colonel. You have been expecting him to be evil. Wait a minute. I was just seeing him the way he is. Really? What part of him? His ego or his higher soul self? Yin was right. All this was something I thought I'd learnt with the 10th insight, but I wasn't acting on it. When I was running from him, I said he was able to follow me. He said he could do it with his mind and intuition. Were you thinking of him? Yin asked, expecting him to follow you. I must have been. Don't you remember? That's what was happening with me earlier. And now you're doing the same thing. That expectation was creating the thoughts in Chang's mind of where you were. It was an ego thought, but it came to him because you were expecting, praying, in effect, for him to find you. Don't you see, Yin continued? We've talked about this so many times. Our prayer field is working constantly in the world, sending out our expectations. And in the case of another person, the effect is almost instantaneous. Luckily, as I said before, such a negative prayer is not as strong as a positive prayer because you immediately cut yourself off from your higher self energies, but it still has an effect. This is the hidden process behind your golden rule. I looked at him for a moment, not understanding. I took a minute to remember what he was referring to. The Bible injunction to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I couldn't exactly see the connection and asked him to explain. The rule sounds, Yin went on, as though it should be kept because it creates a good society, right, as an ethical stance. But the fact is there is a real spiritual, energetic, karmic reason that goes beyond the notion that this is a good idea. It is important to keep this rule because you're affected personally. He paused dramatically, then added, the more complete expression of this rule should be, do unto others the way you would have them do unto you, because how you treat them or think about them is exactly how they're going to treat you. The prayer that you send out with your feeling or action tends to bring out in them exactly what you expect. I nodded. The idea was starting to sink in. In the case of the Colonel, when you conclude he is evil, your prayer energy goes out and enters his energy and adds to his tendencies. And so he begins to act the way you expect him to act, in an angry, ruthless manner, because he isn't connected with a deeper divine energy. His ego energy is weak and malleable. He takes on the role you expect of him. Think back to how things generally operate in human culture. This effect is everywhere. Remember that we humans share attitudes and moods. It's all very contagious. When we look out at others and make judgments, thinking that they are fat or thin or underachieved or ugly or poorly dressed, we actually send our energy out at these people and they often begin to think bad thoughts about themselves. We are engaging in what can only be called the energy of evil. It is the contagion of negative prayer. But what are we supposed to do? I protested. Don't we have to see things as they are? Of course we have to see things the way they are. But after that, we must immediately shift our expectations from what is to what could be. In the case of the Colonel, you should have realized that even though he was acting evilly, cut off from anything spiritual, his higher self was capable of seeing the light in an instant. That's the expectation you want to hold, because then you are really sending your prayer field out to lift his energy and awareness in that direction. You must return to that mental posture always, no matter what you see. He paused, dramatically smiling. which I thought was strange given our situation and his bruised, cut face. "They beat you?" I asked. "It's nothing. I haven't wished on them," he said, making his point at one more time. "Do you see how important all this is?" Yin asked. "You cannot go further with the extensions until you understand this. Anger will always be a temptation. It feels good. It makes our egos think we are becoming stronger. You have to be smarter than that. You cannot reach the strongest levels of creative energy until you can avoid negative prayer of all kinds. There is enough evil out there without adding to it unconsciously. This is the great truth behind the Tibetan Code of Compassion." I looked away, knowing that all Yin was saying was true. I had slipped into this pattern of anger again. Why did I keep doing this over and over? Yin caught my eye. Here is the cap to this idea. In correcting a counterproductive pattern in oneself, in our case, anger and condemnation, it is imperative not to put out a negative prayer about our own possibilities. Do you see what I mean? If we make self-defeating comments such as, "I can't overcome this problem," or "I'll always be in this way," then we are in fact praying to stay the way we are. We have to hold a vision that we will find a higher energy and overcome our patterns. We have to uplift ourselves with our own prayer energy. He leaned back on the cot. This is the lesson I myself had to learn. I could never understand the attitude of compassion that Lama Rigdon held towards the Chinese government. They were destroying our country and I wanted them vanquished. I had never been close enough to any of the soldiers to look in their eyes, to see them as people caught up in the tyrannical system. But once I saw past their egos, their socialization, I could finally learn not to add to the energy of evil with my negative assumptions. I could finally hold a higher vision for them and myself. Perhaps because I have learnt this, I can also hold a higher vision that you will learn it also. Okay, so that's it for today. Don't forget to check the links down below. Check the links on my channel. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you know when the next video will be uploaded. And I want to say a huge thank you to my Ko-Fi family and supporters. Thank you to everybody. Really, really appreciate that indeed. Take care and blessed be.